Yes, indeed. Let religion be to us the lure of that which is only partially understood. The moment you were born, the doctor took a look between your legs and declared, it's a boy or it's a girl, unless it wasn't readily clear, which is more common than one would think. From a study entitled Ambiguous Sex, it's noted that the total number of people whose body differs from the standard male or female is 1 in 100 births. And the total number of people who are receiving surgery as infants to normalize genital appearance is 1 or 2 in 1,000. About 1 in 1,000 births are males who have Klinefelter syndrome. They have an X or female chromosome or an XXY pattern. And as children, they look the same as other boys, but at puberty, there may be breast development and other changes. All this is to say what Margaret Fuller knew back in 1845, that male and female are not exclusive categories. Being male or female is more than body parts and chromosomes. There are at least 3 other categories that must be examined: orientation, presentation, and identity. Sexual orientation refers to who a person is attracted to, as summarized by a song by Chicago folk singer Steve Goodman. There are men who love women who love men. There are women who love women every now and then. There are men who love men because they can't pretend they are men who love women who love men. Steve left out those of both sexes who are attracted by both sexes. And there is sometimes pressure and prejudice from heterosexuals and homosexuals that bisexuals should just pick a side, pick a team. Right? So we have Colbert, he says, we're at war, pick a side. There's a duality in much of human thought that seeks the simplicity of dividing the world into 2 categories, like those who agree with me and those who are wrong. Or male and female, gay and straight, black and white, yes or no. Some people are angered by ambiguity, but ambiguity is reality. Now, the most ambiguous category that I described above about ways to consider sexuality or gender is presentation. How does one try to enhance one's femininity or masculinity? I mean, how one dresses is subject to fashion. I mean, jeans and T-shirts or jeans and a polo used to be totally male clothing. As I look out in the audience today, I see a lot of female cross-dressers today. Because the standards of feminine dress have changed so much over the last 2 decades that cross-dressing males are often easy to spot, because if they are wearing something feminine, it's at least 2 decades old in fashion. Sexual identity is the category that many find hardest to get their mind around. Sexual identity is whether one thinks of oneself as male or female. This is the sexual category that's most hidden. It's inside our brains. The National Center for Transgender Equality makes the distinction between the terms transsexual and transgender. Transgender is an umbrella term for people whose gender identity, expression, or behavior is different from those who typically associated with their assigned sex at birth. And I like that term, assigned sex, because it's the doctor who assigns, and especially in 1 in 1,000 cases, surgically determines. A transsexual, on the other hand, is a term for people whose gender identity is different from their assigned sex at birth. And sometimes transsexual people will alter or change their bodies through hormones and surgery to match the internal gender identity. This is an important distinction to make because we just kind of add T to the LGBT thing, and it stands for trans something. And it's generally, transgender is the big, broad category of anything that is not sexually in the sexually rigid categories. But transsexual is a specific term referring to identity. And this confuses a lot of people because they say, how can people feel like they are a different sex than they are? But when we think about it more, it's not so uncommon for people to have an identity that is separate from the specifics of their body. When women who have breasts removed due to cancer still identify as a woman. Men who have been injured in the war still identify as male. There is a mental component to what one feels inside about whether one is male or female. There's something about sexual identity that transcends body parts. And this is also true for those who feel they were born into the wrong body. Transsexualism is often derided as being in the head of the person. It's all in their mind. But when one thinks of it, the mind is the most enduring of traits. The concept of I am who I am, we all carry with us. Clothes are more easily changed. Sexual orientation is often subject to experimentation in college, or surgery can change outward appearances. But identity is persistent. Transsexuals don't have surgery to make themselves feel like the opposite gender. They have surgery so that the outside resembles how they feel inside. A transsexual is a state of mind. A transsexual identifies as female or male, whether they've had the surgery or not. As liberals, we are inquiring people, and inquiring minds want to know. And so as we seek understanding, we often feel that we need to know things that we don't really need to know. There's a natural curiosity when one meets a transsexual to say, and so have you had the operation yet? But that misses the point of transsexualism because it's an internal state. And think of it if you were at a cocktail party and someone started asking you questions about your private parts to make some sort of judgment of how masculine or feminine you are. You might think that was rude, and you would be correct. Because the primary factor that separates preoperative transsexuals from postoperative transsexuals is mostly the cost of surgery. But the reality of their experience of being male or female is there, regardless of body parts. Surprisingly, trans people have met almost as much resistance from the gay and lesbian community as from the straight community. Binary thinking is not exclusive to straight people. bisexuality, and transgender issues are inherently non-dual. They resist the idea that things are easily categorized. Some transsexual people consider themselves straight. Their physical appearance might indicate that they are in a same-sex relationship, while mentally they are in an opposite-sex relationship. And so, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force has developed a curriculum to help lesbian and gay affirming groups be more inclusive of transgendered people. They write, "One of the most significant challenges LGBT organizations face is the transgender and bisexual labels that have often been added in name, the addition of the B and the T to LGBT, without any authentic effort to integrate transgender and bisexual people and experiences into the organization. While often well-intentioned, changes in name only render the impact of adding those letters almost meaningless, as transgender people have learned the hard way. Because the addition of the T only sometimes translates into concrete programs or even genuine welcome. Trans people may view the T with suspicion or simply ignore it altogether. Transgender people have also encountered overt hostility in some LGBT organizations. Some people, regardless of their sexual orientation, are uncomfortable with transgender people because of the transphobia they've learned from the larger society. Sometimes lesbian and gay people recycle the homophobia they have heard and use it against transgender people, saying things like, 'That's not natural. Are you sure it's not just a phase?' The result is that transgender people have learned through painful experience that lesbian, gay, and bisexual spaces are not always welcoming, safe environments for them. So the first step towards inclusion is trying to get some understanding, and that's by listening. We cannot just assume that we are inclusive. We need to change our way of thinking. Gone are the days when men were men and women were women. The dualistic categories no longer fit reality and probably never did. Upon closer examination, the world is more complex. Male and female is a reductionist distortion of sexuality. It crams things into two categories when there are so many more. Physically, there are at least three genders: male, female, and intersex. There are at least three sexual orientations: homosexual, heterosexual, and bisexual. There are at least three ways of presentation: masculine, feminine, or androgynous dress. And three gender identities of what's going on inside of someone's head: male or female, or both. Physicality, orientation, presentation, and identity can be combined in any way. So those of you who like math, 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 expands it to 81 sexual types. Just because someone's transgender doesn't mean they're gay. Just because someone dresses in a male way doesn't mean that they're not feminine. There's all different ways that this mix happens. So we need to stop thinking about two genders and maybe think of 81. And that's not even enough, because I didn't include people who classify themselves as asexual. And that doesn't even get to the categories of practice. A person would be celibate, monogamous, serially monogamous, one monogamous relationship after another, or polyamorous, be in multiple relationships. There can be infinite variety. As long as one's sexual behavior is consensual and does not harm others, it should not be regulated. People who crave order want a minimum of individuality. Individual differences are viewed with suspicion. Society is sometimes built on order and conformity to norms. Hence the word normal. And sometimes all that normal means is the majority. And people get the mistake that, well, if 80% do this, then that's normal, and everything else is deviant. But if things occur, like freckles, most people don't have freckles, and so freckles are not normal in the sense of average person doesn't have a lot of freckles. But to then call people who have freckles deviants really misses the point of an inclusive society. But there's another way to build community. One that insists on individuality. One that seeks understanding rather than conformity. Categorical thinking requires that people fit into categories before they are eligible for love. Non-categorical thinking starts with the assumption that all people are lovable and the community must change to fit the individuals. We were talking in the forum a little bit about Ayn Rand and individualism and comparing that to Emerson and self-reliance. And sometimes Unitarian Universalism is seen as a selfish religion because we get to believe what we want. And our first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And so there's a difference between integrity and selfishness. Selfishness is my own inherent worth and dignity. Integrity is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We not only defend our own right to be ourselves, but we defend everybody's right to be themselves. I love call and response in you churches. I wish we had more of it. As Unitarian Universalists, we try to go beyond theological categories. Religion is more complex than Christian or non-Christian. There are many types of Christianity and many types of non-Christianity. Faith is a spectrum of beliefs, and the categories are not mutually exclusive. It is complex. It becomes more complex if you are told only certain categories of people are lovable. But it becomes simpler if we dedicate ourselves to unconditional love. My job is to love the person in front of me, to seek to understand them, to learn what they need, and to share my needs with them. Each of us are strange in one way or another. And we will remain strangers unless we strive to know each other. Mutual respect allows for individual differences. The infinite variety of humanity is a wonder to behold. Let us hold on to one another and be wonderful to each other. May we bless and be blessed.